Right now, you are the only kind of human alive, but 70,000 years ago, you would have shared the planet with at least 8 others. Think about that for a second. Walk outside today and every person you see is the same species you are. Homo sapiens, one kind. That feels normal, because it is all you have ever known. But on the long timeline of being human, it is the weird part. For almost the entire history of our genus, sharing the Earth with other humans, other kinds of humans with different bodies, different brains, different faces, was the default. Then, in a geological blink, every single one of them vanished, except us. Most people assume the answer is obvious. We won because we were smarter, bigger brains, better tools, language. End of story. But that is not quite right. Neanderthals had brains slightly larger than ours. Denisovans were trading obsidian across thousands of kilometers. The hobbits of Flores were making stone tools for nearly 1,000,000 years. The real story is stranger, messier, and a lot more uncomfortable than a simple victory lap. Let's meet the others. Start with Homo erectus, the marathon runner of the human family. Erectus showed up around 2 million years ago in East Africa, and they did something no human had ever done before. They left. They walked out of Africa and kept walking all the way to Georgia, to China, to Java in Indonesia. They controlled fire. They cared for their elderly. And here is the part that should stop you cold. Homo erectus existed for roughly 1.9 million years. Our species, Homo sapiens, has been around for about 300,000. Erectus was, by a wide margin, the most successful human that ever lived. The last of them died on the island of Java sometime around 110,000 years ago, according to dating work led by Russell Teo-Chong at the University of Iowa in 2019. They were still out there when we were already here. Then there is Homo heidelbergensis, the middle child. Heidelbergensis lived from about 700,000 to 200,000 years ago across Africa, Europe, and parts of Asia. They were tall, powerfully built, and they were the first humans we know of who built shelters and hunted big game with wooden spears. A site called Schöningen in Germany produced 8 perfectly preserved throwing spears dated to around 300,000 years ago. Heidelbergensis is important for another reason. Most paleoanthropologists, including Chris Stringer at the Natural History Museum in London, think this species is the common ancestor that split into 3 lineages: the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and us. The Neanderthals are the ones you have heard of. Stocky, cold adapted, with brains averaging around 1,400 cubic centimeters, slightly larger than the modern human average. They lived across Europe and Western Asia from about 400,000 years ago until roughly 40,000 years ago. They buried their dead. They made jewelry from eagle talons. A 2018 study by Dirk Hoffmann at the Max Planck Institute dated cave paintings in Spain to at least 64,000 years ago, 20,000 years before our species even arrived in the region. Neanderthals painted those caves. The cliché of the dumb caveman is just wrong. The Denisovans are the ghosts. We did not even know they existed until 2010, when Svante Pääbo's team at the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig sequenced DNA from a single finger bone found in Denisova cave in Siberia. That finger bone belonged to a girl who lived about 50,000 years ago and was not a Neanderthal and not a modern human. She was something else. We still have only a handful of physical bones from the entire species. But their genome is alive inside people today, especially in Tibet, Papua New Guinea, and the Philippines. The gene that lets Tibetans breathe at 4,000 meters of altitude, it came from a Denisovan ancestor. Now it gets stranger. In 2003, a team led by Mike Morwood found a skeleton in Liangboa cave on the Indonesian island of Flores. She stood about 1.06 meters tall, 3.5 feet, an adult. Her brain was the size of a grapefruit, around 400 cubic centimeters. They called her Homo floresiensis, the hobbit. She and her kind hunted dwarf elephants on Flores until about 50,000 years ago. Then, in 2019, another team led by Florent Detroit at the Musée de l'Homme in Paris announced a second tiny human species, Homo luzonensis, from Callao Cave in the Philippines. 2 separate islands, 2 separate miniature humans, both alive at the same time as us. And then there is Homo naledi, discovered in 2013 by Lee Berger and his team in the Rising Star cave system in South Africa. Naledi had a brain about a third the size of yours, a curved spine and curved fingers for climbing. Everyone assumed they were ancient, maybe 2 million years old. The dating came back in 2017. Homo naledi was alive between 335,000 and 236,000 years ago. They were sharing southern Africa with the very first members of our species, and they appear to have been carrying their dead deep into the cave system on purpose in total darkness. So what happened? 8 species, give or take, then 1. The honest answer is, we are still figuring it out, but the story is not a single battle, it is a slow squeeze. Climate did some of the work. The period between roughly 70,000 and 40,000 years ago was brutally unstable, rapid swings between glacial cold and brief warm spells. Small populations on the edge, like late Neanderthals or the Flores hobbits, would have been pushed to the brink with every swing. Competition did some of the work. Wherever Homo sapiens shows up in the archaeological record, the local human species disappears within a few thousand years. Neanderthals vanish from Europe within about 5,000 years of our arrival. Denisovans fade from Asia. Erectus disappears from Java. That is not a coincidence. We were probably better at long-distance trade, at planning, at organizing larger social groups. We outcompeted them for the same food, the same caves, the same valleys. And interbreeding did some of the work, but not in the way you would expect. Pääbo's lab showed that if your ancestry is outside sub-Saharan Africa, roughly 1 to 2% of your DNA is Neanderthal. If you are from Melanesia, up to 5% of your DNA is Denisovan. We did not just meet them, we had children with them. Some of those children had children. A 2018 paper described a 13-year-old girl from Denisova Cave whose mother was Neanderthal and whose father was Denisovan, a first-generation hybrid. The boundaries between species were leaky. Here is the twist. The standard story is that we wiped them out, but the genetic evidence suggests something subtler and sadder. The other human populations were already small. Neanderthal effective population size may have been as low as 3,000 breeding adults across all of Europe near the end. When sapiens swept in, we did not need to fight a war. We just had to be slightly more numerous, slightly more flexible, and willing to absorb whoever was left. The other humans did not get massacred, they got outbred. Their bloodlines trickled into ours and then thinned out until the distinct populations were gone and only the genes remained. Which means they are not really extinct, not entirely. If you have ever wondered why you get cold easily, or why your immune system reacts the way it does, or why your hair is the color it is, some of those answers were written into your DNA by people who were not quite your species tens of thousands of years ago in a cave you will never see. For almost 2 million years, being human meant looking around and seeing other kinds of humans, different faces, different minds, different ways of being people. And then, slowly, one by one, they were gone, until the only humans left were the ones who carried pieces of all the others inside them. That is you. You are the last one standing, and you are also quietly all of them. So tonight, when you look in the mirror, look a little longer. There is more than one person in there.